You know, when it comes to history, we all have these stories we think we know. As a historian, my favorite thing to do is dig a little deeper. Today, we're going back to one of the most famous moments in the civil rights movement, the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And I'll make you a promise. By the end of this, the story you learned in school is going to look a whole lot different.
Okay, so let's start right there. We're going to begin with the story that's been told in classrooms for decades. The powerful, but, as we'll see, very incomplete legend of a tired seamstress who supposedly sparked a revolution all by herself.
So, yeah, the story we all know. It's simple, it's heroic, it focuses on one woman, one single act of defiance, and the huge citywide firestorm that came next. It's a great story, but it's really just the opening chapter.
All right, let's set the scene. On the buses in Montgomery, Alabama, back in 1955, segregation wasn't just a custom, it was the law. The city code actually gave bus drivers the powers of a police officer to enforce it, and this police diagram from the day shows you exactly where Rosa Parks was sitting, right in the first row of what they called the colored section. So when the white section filled up and another white passenger got on, she was ordered to get up and move.
And this is the key part of the common story, right? Her arrest is presented as the singular spark. Rosa Parks, this calm, well-respected woman in the community, she just says no. And supposedly, the black community, so inspired by her courage, just rises up as one. And boom, the Montgomery Bus Boycott begins. It's a clean, inspiring story. But the truth? Well, the truth is a lot messier, and it had actually started months earlier. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because that fuse, it was actually lit 9 whole months before Rosa Parks' arrest by a 15-year-old high school student, and her name was Claudette Colvin.
So picture this. Claudette's on her way home from school. Her head is just filled with what she'd been learning about the Constitution and heroes like Harriet Tubman, and she refuses to give up her seat to a white passenger. When the police showed up, they didn't just ask her to leave. They dragged her off that bus, kicking her and calling her names while she's screaming, "It's my constitutional right!"
Now, Colvin's arrest sent shockwaves through the black community. I mean, this felt like the test case they had been waiting for. But the movement's leaders, including a young Martin Luther King Jr., they made a very pragmatic and very difficult choice. They believed that to win over the public, their symbol couldn't be a feisty, lower-income teenager who, and this complicated things, became pregnant shortly after her arrest. So they waited. 9 months later, when Rosa Parks, a calm, middle-class NAACP secretary, was arrested, they decided they had the perfect plaintiff they believed America was ready for.
So the stage was set. With Rosa Parks as the public face, the boycott kicked off. And this immediately became a two-front war. You had the protests happening in the streets, and then you had the city's fierce, aggressive reaction.
In January of '56, Mayor W.A. Gale announced the city's counterattack. It was called the Get Tough Policy. And this wasn't just talk, it was a declaration of war. It meant no more negotiations, no more discussions. Instead, the city decided to weaponize the law. They dug up some forgotten old statute from 1921 to start arresting the protest leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., for organizing an illegal boycott. The message was crystal clear. The city was going to use all of its power to try and break this movement.
And this right here, this brings us to the most widely misunderstood part of this entire story. The boycott was absolutely brilliant. It was economically devastating to the city, and it showed the entire world the power of nonviolent protest. But, and this is a huge but, it did not, by itself, legally end segregation on the buses in Montgomery. A federal lawsuit did.
This is the version of history that often gets told. It's a simple, satisfying ending, right? The hero of the story, Rosa Parks, takes her case to court, she wins, and the boycott is over. It's a great story. It's just not what happened.
The legal reality was this. Rosa Parks had been charged with violating a city segregation rule, so her case was a criminal matter, and it was tied up in the Alabama state court system, a system that, let's be honest, designed to uphold segregation. Legally speaking, it was a complete dead end.
To actually win this thing, the movement's lawyers had to do something really smart. They had to completely bypass the state courts. So they filed a totally separate civil lawsuit directly in federal court. See, this wasn't about one person breaking a city rule anymore. This was about arguing that the rule itself, segregation, was a violation of the U.S. Constitution. And that case was called Browder v. Gale.
And if you look at this timeline, you can see the legal strategy perfectly. While the boycott is grabbing all the headlines, The real legal fight is happening quietly in the background. The Browder case gets filed just 2 months into the boycott, and it moves fast through the federal system, all the way to a Supreme Court victory that finally, legally, dismantled bus segregation.
So who were the plaintiffs in this historic lawsuit? Well, it couldn't be Rosa Parks. Her criminal case was still open, and that would have been a legal roadblock. So the lawyers needed new plaintiffs, women who were willing to step up and become targets, and among the 4 who bravely volunteered was the person who started this whole thing 9 months earlier, Claudette Colvin. So while the whole world was watching the boycott on the streets, it was actually Claudette Colvin who took the witness stand in federal court, and when a white lawyer asked her she would go back to sitting in the back of the bus, she didn't even hesitate. She said, "No, I want to be treated like a human being." It was her testimony, along with the others, that won the legal victory.
So this all leads to a really profound and, frankly, troubling question. If Claudette Colvin was not only the first one to refuse, but also a key plaintiff in the lawsuit that actually won, why is she just a footnote in history?
The answer really lies in the difficult politics of how we remember things. The leaders of the movement, they made a strategic calculation. They believed that to win over mainstream America, they needed a sanitized story. They needed a symbol who was respectable, calm, and non-threatening. Rosa Parks was that perfect symbol. Claudette Colvin, in their eyes, was just not.
And that strategy raises a tough question about how history is made. You see, this wasn't just a spontaneous thing. It was a campaign. It had public relations, it had strategic planning, it had branding. And in that branding, one hero was lifted up and another was left behind.
And the personal cost for Claudette was immense. In Montgomery, she was labeled a troublemaker. She couldn't find work. Eventually, she had to move to New York City, where she worked as a nurse's aide, in total anonymity for 30 years. The young woman who sparked one of America's greatest protests was basically erased from the story she helped write.
And so we're left with this really difficult question. The movement's leaders chose a polished, marketable legend over the raw, complicated truth. And that strategy, you could argue it helped them win. But at what cost? What do we lose when we choose a sanitized story over the messy and more complete reality? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.